Caleb Rourke woke to the buzz of a phone vibrating on the nightstand, the screen flashing against the dim room like a warning beacon. He squinted toward it, annoyed more than concerned. Nothing good ever came before dawn. But he reached for it anyway because fathers don't ignore early messages, not when life has already taken enough from them. One line. No greeting. No explanation. I'm getting married next month in Bristlehaven. You're not invited. He reread it, expecting some punchline, some context, anything. But the words sat there, blunt and cold. No emojis, no dad. No, I'm sorry. Just a conclusion. He sat there for a long while, elbows on his knees, phone dangling in both hands like something he wasn't sure he should touch. He whispered her childhood name without meaning to. Mara, not Marielle Rowan. The name she adopted the minute she entered the glass and marble world of her fiancé's family. Mara had been the kid who used to sneak into his workshop with her hair tied back in a crooked ponytail and ask, "Can I help shape something today?" She once welded her initials into a scrap sheet and gave it to him for Father's Day. It still sat in a drawer somewhere beneath tax papers and old screws. He didn't recognize the woman who wrote the message. The house was cold, the kind of cold that made joints complain. He stood, walked to the kitchen, and set the phone face down on the table. When he slid a hand through his hair, he felt the tremor. He didn't cry. Not yet. Men like Caleb didn't cry in the moment. The tears waited until some later, unfair hour. At 5:30 a.m., he finally turned the phone over again, half convinced he'd misread it. He hadn't. He tried to make coffee, hands shaking. He spilled the first scoop, then the second. By the time the machine sputtered to life, he realized he hadn't really breathed since the message arrived. His chest felt tight, not like a heart attack. He knew that feeling well enough, but like someone had pressed a hot iron over his ribs and held it there. His first instinct was to call her. His second was to hurl the phone into the sink. He did neither. Instead, he opened the cabinet above the fridge where he'd shoved months of saved envelopes, tuition bills, scholarship deferrals, transfer confirmations. Papers he'd kept because they represented the life he thought he was helping her build. The most recent slip sat on top. The final school payment. Almost every spare dollar he'd had. He held it between his fingers, the edges soft from handling. He'd been proud when he sent that transfer. Proud in that quiet, ordinary way working men carry their victories. He swallowed. Hard. He didn't go to the bank right away. He paced the house instead. Down the hall, into the small laundry room, back through the living room, arms folded across his chest, as if he could keep something inside from spilling out. Every step felt like a question. What did I do wrong? When did I lose her? Why was I the one being cut out? He'd fought so hard to keep her life intact when her mother walked out. He'd taken extra shifts, broken his back on overtime jobs, skipped meals, sold gear, skipped dental appointments, everything. And she cut him out with a sentence. He finally forced himself into his jacket around 7:30. The world outside was too bright, too indifferent. He drove slowly, stopping twice at green lights because his brain forgot the colors. At the bank parking lot, he didn't get out. He sat there in the truck, engine running, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that the leather dug into his palms. He waited until he didn't feel like crying anymore. It took 15 minutes. The bank didn't make it easy. Good. A woman named Denise, older, patient, sharp eyes, looked over the paperwork with a frown. International tuition transfers can't be reversed instantly, she said. If it already cleared their receiving bank, we'll have to file a hold and request a compliance review. Could take a day, could take 3. Caleb nodded. And, she added, you'll need to sign a withdrawal of authorization form. Do you want time to think it over? These things are sensitive. He almost laughed. Sensitive was not the word he'd use. But he didn't sign, not yet. He took the form and slid it into his jacket. I'll bring it back, he said. He wasn't sure if it was true. Walking back to the truck, the morning felt heavier. His boots scraped the pavement like they weighed more than metal. Marielle called at 10:04. He didn't answer. He let it go to voicemail because he wasn't sure he could hear her voice without breaking in half. Her message was shaky. Dad, hey, I didn't mean for you to find out like that. It's been complicated here. Can you just call me? Please. There's a lot happening, and just call me. Not cold. Not robotic. Scared. He listened 3 times. Each time, something different cut him. Then the fiancé called. Eli Harrington. Caleb didn't want to answer. But he did. Eli's voice was softer than he expected. Not polished, precise. Like someone who corrected people's grammar in his head. Mr. Rourke, good morning. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. Caleb said nothing. I just wanted to clear the air, Eli continued. Marielle is overwhelmed. My family tends to scrutinize things. They ask questions. About stability, background, contribution, the optics of. He paused, and then did something strange. He laughed, but not at Caleb. At something internal. You know, Eli said, my mother has a phrase for this. Don't invite what you can't predict. She's very firm about it. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't polite. It was curious, like the man was taking notes. Caleb hung up before he said something he'd regret. By noon, he was at his workshop. The familiar smell of oil and old steel steadied him. Marcus and Joel were already there, arguing over whether a rusted hinge was worth salvaging. They took one look at him and quieted. You all right, boss? Marcus asked. Yeah, Caleb lied. He picked up a torch, not to work, but because the weight of it reminded him of who he was outside other people's expectations. He struck the flame. It hissed to life, steady, unbothered by anything human. He held it close to a piece of scrap metal until sparks lifted in small bursts. The sound was grounding, real, predictable, unlike people, but he didn't lose himself in it. Not today. The metaphor didn't soothe him. It simply kept him from shaking. When he turned off the torch, the phone buzzed again. A new message. From Marielle. But this one wasn't a voicemail. It wasn't a text. It was a bank alert. Your transfer authorization has been reactivated by a secondary party. Caleb blinked. Reactivated? By who? How? He felt a cold drop run down his spine. On the screen, beneath the alert, was a line he hadn't seen before. If this was not you, please contact your bank immediately. A second alert arrived instantly. Transfer scheduled. 3:15 p.m. today. He stared at the phone, heart pounding. Someone had restarted the payment. Someone with access. The chapter ends there. The two bank alerts stared up from Caleb's phone like they had teeth. Transfer reactivated. Processing scheduled for 3:15 p.m. The sounds in the workshop dulled, then vanished. Marcus and Joel were arguing over a stripped bolt in the next bay, but Caleb only saw movement, no sound. His pulse thudded hard enough that he felt it in his jaw. Someone had pushed the transfer back through the system. Someone with access. He checked the alerts again, hoping the words would rearrange into something benign. They didn't. His grip tightened until the phone's casing creaked. Boss. Marcus called, cautious. You look pale. Caleb forced a nod. Keep working. I need air. He stepped out into the loading area where the morning wind hit like a slap. The truth settled in his gut with a heavy, metallic drop. 3 people had ever touched that account. Himself. Marielle. The loan officer who helped set up the transfer. No one else. No outsiders. No accidents. He replayed Marielle's earlier voicemail, her voice thin and trembling. Dad, just call me. I didn't mean for you to find out like that. He remembered her at 12, standing in his shop with welding gloves that swallowed her hands. Her ponytail was crooked, goggles fogged from excitement. She'd made her first weld that day, an uneven, ugly little line, but she'd beamed at it like it was gold. Look, Dad, it's crooked, but it's mine. That girl had trusted him with every fear and every triumph. The woman she'd become felt like a stranger wearing his daughter's face. He pressed call. She answered instantly, too instantly. Dad? Dad? Thank God. Okay, listen, I swear I can explain. Did you restart the transfer? A shaky breath. What? No. Dad, I didn't. Why would I? He waited. People who lied rushed. People who panicked stumbled. She did both. I didn't even know you stopped it until Eli. Until he saw the alert. And then he got tense. And Dad, things are insane here. I didn't touch it. Why would he get alerts from my account? Silence. A long, guilty one. You put him as a secondary contact that day, she said quietly. When I was overseas and the bank needed 2 reachable numbers, you remember? You were tired, and he said he'd handle the paperwork. And, Dad, please don't be mad. Caleb felt heat rise up his neck. Receiving alerts doesn't mean he can access my account. I know that. He wouldn't do anything like that. I swear. He's just trying to keep everything from falling apart over here. What's falling apart? Another silence. Then her voice came cracked and too fast. His family is freaking out, okay? About invitations, about the rehearsal dinner, about optics and consistency, and, Dad, they don't like surprises. And you canceling the transfer, it made them nervous. And I'm the surprise, he said quietly. No, it's not you. It's just, you've had some hard years and they're worried and I didn't say that right, but, Dad, please, don't make this worse. His breath left him in a slow, heavy exhale. Did Eli restart the transfer? I don't know, she whispered. I'll ask him. Please don't hate me. He hung up, not because he hated her, but because hearing her crack like that made something inside him tilt dangerously. The fiancé called next. The phone buzzed once. Caleb answered. Mr. Rourke. Eli's voice was smooth, almost cheerful. Let's clear up this misunderstanding. Did you reauthorize my transfer? Caleb asked. A tiny pause. Too tiny. No, Eli said lightly. I simply phoned the bank to make sure there was no disruption in Marielle's record. They mentioned an interruption. I assumed it was clerical. You assumed wrong. Well, things happen. Systems hiccup. People forget details. A beat. And Marielle is under a great deal of pressure. She told me about your temper. Caleb's jaw locked. My temper? Oh, it's nothing, Eli said, chuckling lightly. Just a pattern she's noticed. Unexpected reactions. Instability. It concerns her. There it was. Not a threat. A character assassination dressed as concern. You don't know a damn thing about me, Caleb said before he could stop himself. Eli paused, almost delighted. That's the reaction I expected. Thank you for the honesty. The hair on Caleb's arms rose. I don't care what your expectations are, Caleb growled. Oh, but you should, Eli replied softly. Your daughter's future depends on choosing stability, not unpredictability. Caleb froze. The tone wasn't polite, it was diagnostic. Clinical. Like Eli was studying him. And enjoying it. Caleb hung up abruptly. Back in the workshop, things got dangerous. He picked up the torch with trembling hands. Sparks flared too high, too fast. A bead of molten metal spit upward and burned a tiny hole through his sleeve. Boss, Joel shouted. Hey, watch it. Caleb jerked the torch off and set it down too hard. His hands weren't steady. The steel table clanged under the impact. He was unraveling, and the workshop, normally his sanctuary, felt hostile. Someone had crossed a line, and they were still crossing. At 2:45, his phone buzzed again. Transfer processing in 30 minutes. He grabbed his jacket. Boss, Marcus called. You want one of us with you? No, Caleb said. I need to know what the hell is going on. He walked out and stopped dead. A white envelope sat on the driver's seat of his truck. No postage. No name. He hadn't been outside. No one had gone near the lot. He opened it with a thumb. Inside was a single printed line. Stop interfering. This isn't about you. The edges of the paper were warm, as if whoever left it had just walked away. Caleb drove with the heater on high, not to chase off the cold, but to stop his hands from shivering long enough to steer. The white envelope sat on the passenger seat like an accusation. He didn't open it again. The words printed on the paper were already lodged behind his teeth. The Granite State Credit Union smelled like lemon cleaner and dry upholstery. Denise glanced up from her desk, then did a very small double take when she saw him come in like a man who'd already fought the world and lost. You back? She murmured. Caleb put the photocopy of the override request on the counter. He didn't wait for her to read it. Who authorized this? I need a log, a name, an IP, anything. Her face tightened. We can't give out customer details without a subpoena, Mr. Rourke. You know that. I don't have time for legal formalities, he said. Someone forged my signature and routed my money. 30 minutes. I need to know who. Denise hesitated for a long beat. Banking procedure felt like a wall. She called someone under her breath, and, when she put the phone down, she was smaller. I can escalate, she said. But it's not something we just hand to customers. A different staffer appeared, a man in a careful tie who introduced himself as Marcus Hale from compliance. He moved like someone who'd used "we can't" his whole professional life. We logged an internal override request, he said, eyes flicking to the photocopy as if it were hot. Requests like this normally require branch manager sign-off and a partner institution code. We can run logs, but legally I can't release the documents without a court order. Then at least tell me if the code comports to Bristlehaven Trust. Caleb leaned in until he felt the breath on his face. Tell me if that stamp is their stamp. Marcus's jaw worked. I can say there is a stamp that corresponds to a partner institution listed in Bristlehaven. That's all I can say without higher authorization. No, Caleb said, quieter. Say it straight. Did Bristlehaven Trust request an override? Marcus looked around. Then, in a move that felt like mercy and betrayal at once, pulled up a redacted ledger on his screen and turned the monitor. A single line showed, override request, manager code, BH77, partner, Bristlehaven Trust, authorization received. Denise's stomach twisted with the look of someone bending rules for the first time. I shouldn't be showing you this, she whispered. If this goes sideways. You just showed me enough, Caleb said. He felt the floor tilt. The stamp on the photocopy suddenly made sense. Someone in Bristlehaven had reached into his account. Marcus's voice softened. It appears the request came via inter-branch authorization routed through a partner manager in your daughter's region. That means it didn't come from some anonymous hacker. It came through official channels. We can pursue reversal, but that takes time. We'll need a formal fraud claim. Time. The word tasted like sand. He left the bank with more questions than answers and drove to Hector's office because Hector had been the one who'd set up the wire. Hector's place smelled of stale coffee and paperwork. He smiled when Caleb walked in, too quick, like a man trying to patch a wall with tape. You look like you swallowed a storm, Hector said, but there wasn't malice in it. Only the weary sympathy of a man who'd once offered help and then realized he'd maybe handed someone a knife. Caleb dropped the printout on Hector's desk. You sent my paperwork where? He said. Who did you email my authorization to? Hector's hands trembled. A small, honest tremble, not a staged tremble. Caleb, I forwarded the contact you signed off on. You signed a form giving us permission to list a secondary contact for emergencies. I forwarded that to Ms. Rowan's contact on the file because I was told it would make the process easier. You forwarded it to Harrington? Hector's face went slack. He rubbed his temple. They asked us to send documents to an events coordinator email. I didn't think. He stopped, and for a second, he looked like a man trying to climb out of quicksand. They called and said they'd route everything internally in Bristlehaven. They gave me a manager contact. Did Harrington ask you to sign anything? Did they pressure you to make things move faster? Caleb's voice had a thin edge. Hector swallowed. They were polite. Insistent. The woman on the phone said they had a manager who could handle event disbursements. I didn't think it would. I thought I was helping Marielle. You thought you were helping my daughter, Caleb said, and the words finally slipped from somewhere deep. For a beat, he had the kind of anger he used to store up for winter storms. A slow, heavy heat. He slammed his palm down on the desk, so hard a coffee cup jumped. Everyone in the office looked at him. The sound of the hand against wood echoed. Hector flinched as if hit. Caleb, wait. You gave them my keys, Caleb said. You handed them a map. Hector's eyes filled. I'm sorry. I was trying to be helpful. They asked for convenience details. I forwarded an email. I didn't know. God, I didn't know they would forge anything. Silence pressed in. Hector's apology was small and ragged. He looked like a man who'd accidentally walked through someone else's life and left a trail of footprints. Caleb left Hector's office with a march in his step, but the march faltered halfway back to the truck. He should have felt vindicated. Instead, he felt empty and colder. At the shop, the tools were louder than usual. The ping of a dropped wrench, the high ring of a metal file. These were small, relentless clocks. He picked up the torch and didn't start it. Instead, he stood with the weight of it in his hands, the metal cool. The workshop's noises, so familiar, now sounded like a courtroom, each sound a witness. He realized then that this wasn't a mistake anyone could simply fix. Someone had used official channels, a partner stamp, and a manager code to reroute his money. That was not an accidental misstep. That was a designed exclusion. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out as if it might bite. An alert from the bank. Payout sent to partner institution. Clearance complete. Caleb's stomach hollowed. The transfer had processed. He pressed his back against the cool metal of the workbench and tried to breathe, but the shop around him hummed louder, the sound of machines that kept running no matter what you did. He felt smaller than the tools he used, trapped in a system that refused to bend. Outside, someone had announced that the sun hadn't set on his right to decide for his child. Inside, the bank had said the money was gone. He thought of Marielle wearing goggles, proud of a crooked welt. He thought of every night he'd worked so she could stand somewhere safer. The phone in his hand was suddenly a weight heavier than any torch. He hit redial on her number, not to ask, but because there was nothing else he could do. But his finger trembled on the screen, because some clocks don't run forward by will. The bank's message had already cooled into a dull ache in Caleb's chest. Payout sent. Clearance complete. He had tried the rational things: Hector, the bank, the photocopy of that stamped override, and each answer only tightened the circle. He'd thought evidence would help. Instead, it had only made the machinery turn faster. When he walked into the shop, the drill and grinder and hiss felt louder than usual, as if the tools themselves were raising their voices to compete with the fight in his head. Marcus and Joel kept their distance the way people do around a man with steam pouring out of his ears, polite, ready in case it all exploded. Caleb let the torch hang cold from its hook and simply listened to the room. A wrench clinking against a bench, the low thrum of the compressor, a pile of metal shavings tinkling as Joel swept. Sounds grounded him and kept him from dropping into the black hole of accusation and counter-accusation. He didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, it wasn't a plan. Hector forwarded my authorization to Harrington's events account. He said, not really a question. The words landed like a dropped weight. Marcus whistled low. Joel's jaw set. You sure? Joel asked. Caleb nodded. Hector told me. He thought he was being helpful. They were quiet. The shop hummed. He tried to call Marielle again, partly because it felt like the only action he could take that didn't involve a courthouse, and partly because he wanted to hear that tremor in her voice and match it with something steady. The call answered on the second ring. Dad, she said. Relief and something tight. Okay. Oh, Jesus, Dad. They listen, they say you. She stopped as if someone had yanked on an invisible leash. Say what? He asked. They told me. They told me that you showed up at the bank yelling at their staff. That you demanded access to accounts you weren't listed on. That you threatened a coordinator about the funds. Her words tumbled out in a rush now, the kind of breathless, ridiculous detail you only hear from someone trying to stitch a story together while their hands are shaking. They said they had security footage. They said if anything else happens, they'll have to go public. They told me to be careful about who I associate with. There it was, a single sentence that landed harder than any forged signature. It wasn't just money anymore. It was character assassination in slow motion. If they could make her slack-jawed at the accusation, he would be isolated and small and suddenly meaningless. He felt the heat climb in his throat, not the hot, quick flare of anger, but the sour burn of fear. Did they show you footage? He asked. She hesitated. The noise on the line shifted, a clack of keys, a muffled male voice in the background. They said they had clips from the counter, that they'd filed an incident report. Marielle's voice now was tiny. Eli's mother says she has grave concerns and they're advising caution. Advising caution, Caleb repeated, tasting the phrase like iron. So they made you a witness to a lie. I didn't see anything. Dad, I swear. They called and told me what to say if anyone asked. They said if I said anything else it would complicate things for me. Please, you have to trust me. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to pick the thread and pull. He kept his voice low. Who told you this, Marielle? An assistant. Her name is Claire. She called and said she was from Harrington House. She told me if my father kept making trouble, the wedding could be canceled and that my academic sponsors might see me as a liability. She said. Her breath hitched as if the next words hurt to say. She said they could ensure I had a future if I didn't ruffle feathers. That last phrase wasn't legalese. It was gatekeeping. The Harringtons weren't just protecting a guest list. They were protecting a larger brand. Donors, trustees, the image of a foundation that could make or break opportunities. That's what Caleb had been fighting all along. The economics of reputation. He felt his control slide. For once his hands did something they normally didn't. They shook visibly. He pressed both palms flat on the bench until the grooves of the metal bit into his skin. Tell me exactly what she said, Marielle. Her voice broke. She said, we recommend you cease public interference. We can take care of matters discreetly. We can protect your daughter's future if you don't cause scenes. Caleb heard the words 3 times, as if someone else was replaying them to make sure they were real. Protect your daughter's future if you don't cause scenes. It was a threat disguised as charity. Who else did they contact? He asked. He tried not to let his voice go sharp. Eli called. He sounded like someone who had rehearsed his calm. He told me he'd handle everything. He told me not to speak to you. He said if I did, it would make things worse. There was a pause. The line carried the sound of a chair scraping, distant voices, then the faint beep, the telltale sign that someone else had picked up on the other end and was listening. She swallowed audibly. "Dad, please just wait. Please don't make any big moves." Wait. He tasted the word again. It had always been used against him. Wait until money runs out. Wait until you tire out. Wait until the storm passes. Wait until someone else, someone with a name and a suit, decides what's best. He let out a sound that wasn't quite a laugh and not quite a sob. "They've already taken it, Mara. Wait doesn't get it back." Her crying started then. A small, surprised sound that made him see her 12-year-old grin with the welding goggles again. The memory arrived like a cut. She, so proud of a crooked weld. Him, so foolishly proud of her pride. He clung to it because it was one of the last unarguable truths between them. "Dad," she whispered. "Please. I can't lose this." His fingers tightened around the phone. For a moment his anger flared hot and indiscriminate. He could imagine going to Bristlehaven and breaking glass, confronting the Harringtons in the open where cameras would show everything and they'd file another report and the media would slice him up. He imagined every wrong turn and every headline. He could see them using those moments as more proof. Instead, his voice went quiet and hard. "Then stop talking to them long enough for us to figure this out," he said. "Don't agree to anything. Don't sign anything. And don't let them isolate you." The line was thin. "Okay," she said, small enough that a gust of wind outside the shop could have blown her away. When the call ended, there was a long, echoing silence in the shop. The compressor hissed and then stopped. A deep, slow ticking began in Caleb's chest. He'd lost the money. He'd lost the narrative. Now they were trying to take his daughter from him as well. Not physically, but through stories, through designations of what was appropriate and stable. They had set the terms of belonging. His phone buzzed again, an email notification. The subject line read, "Notice of temporary asset hold, initiated by Harrington Family Trust, partner institution request." He looked at Marcus and Joel. Neither of them had to say it. The notice was procedural and terrible, a legal wrapper around social power. It meant delay, lawyers, and a public document that cast him as an impediment. Caleb felt suddenly very small in a room full of giant machines. He'd thought metal was the world's only honest thing. Now it felt like another language used to keep him out. He crumpled the paper notice in his fist, and, for the first time since the morning began, he let himself lose it. A sound escaped him, a full, raw bark of anger. Joel froze. Marcus swallowed. It wasn't theatrical. It was a man realizing he'd been fenced out of his own life and hearing the creak of the gate close behind him. He stood there breathing hard as the shop hummed on. Outside, on the street, a truck rumbled by. The world went about its business. He would not. He would not walk away. The email from the Harrington partner landed like a frost. No anger, no flourish. The kind of message meant to feel inevitable. Notice, temporary asset hold initiated by Bristlehaven Trust. For preservation of partner reputation, please cease interference. Continued action may risk associated academic or residency placements. Caleb reread it until the print blurred. The phrasing was surgical. They weren't threatening violence. They were threatening his daughter's future, a slow, administrative strangulation. He rifled through the bank logs on his laptop again because that's what you do when paper is all you have. Look for the seam. And then he saw a detail that punched the air from his lungs. The signature on the override request wasn't his. It matched his wife's signature, his ex-wife Denise's, the handwriting he hadn't seen on anything official since she left town 15 years ago. His hands went cold. Someone had dug her up from the past and used her name as a key. That changed everything. This wasn't just a social siege. It was personal. Someone had access to buried records. Someone knew how to make the paperwork sing. "Boss." Marcus's voice came from the doorway. The shop smelled of oil and metal and something else now, the sharp metallic tang of panic. Caleb tapped the screen until the zoomed signature filled the monitor. "Look." Marcus came over, squinted. "Holy, that's Denise's hand. How would anyone get that?" "Not how," Caleb said. "Why?" He had a direction now. Find who filed that override, and why they used a dead woman's signature to do it. He needed to go to Bristlehaven and speak to the manager whose code showed on the bank log. He needed to see authorization records, CCTV, Anything that bore a stamp or a name. Marcus caught his eye. You want me to come? Caleb had pictured going alone. He had pictured this 100 small ways, each angrier than the last. But there was a practicality in Marcus's presence. If something goes sideways, Marcus said, they'll spin it as intimidation. If I come, I can say I'm a customer, ask normal questions, and I can give you cover. Marcus added something in a voice just low enough for Caleb. My kid's scholarship runs through a foundation that sometimes gets their donations tangled with groups like Harrington. If I piss them off, my boy could lose it. So if I go with you and nothing bad happens, I can say I was there for work stuff. If it does, well, I'm taking a risk, but I owe you. It was the kind of realism that meant loyalty, not blind, but costly. Marcus was choosing to gamble his family's stability on a man he'd followed through winters and lean months. That soil made his choice real. Caleb nodded. Okay, then we go together. We don't yell. We don't make a scene. We ask for records. We ask for CCTV timestamps. We ask who authorized the override and how they accessed Denise's signature. Might they lock it down? Joel asked, voice small from across the base. They already tried, Caleb said. But they left a trail. They used someone's name they shouldn't have. That's a clue. It's not closure, but it's a crack. He stood up and the torch clanged as he bumped it with his hip, a hard, metallic sound that set the workshop into a higher gear. Joel and Marcus fell into motion, checking tools, shutting down machines with deliberate, efficient movements. The men moved as a unit when something big was about to happen. The shop hummed like a heart preparing to sprint. Caleb's plan was simple, terrible, and the only thing that felt right. Go to Bristlehaven. Ask for the manager tied to the code on the override. Demand to see the authorization logs and the CCTV for the morning the transfer was reactivated. If they refused, he'd make a record of that refusal. If they lied, he would find who in their chain had motive to reconstruct his wife from old signatures. He typed a message to Marielle, keeping it short and hard. Don't speak to Harrington. Don't sign. Don't let them isolate you. I'm coming to ask questions. Stay put. Her reply came after a long minute, a line that landed like a plea. They said they can pull my residency offer. They said your behavior could make me an unsuitable candidate on paper. Please be careful. That, finally, was concrete. Not an echo of threat, a surgical lever they could pull. Caleb pocketed the phone and crossed the workshop floor. The concrete felt colder under his boots than it had that morning. He took his keys off the peg and checked the truck's tires like a man checking a gun. Marcus slid into the passenger seat without fanfare. He was a man who kept his risks counted, and he'd chosen to spend one now. Joel watched them from the bay door, his silhouette framed in sparks. They drove out under a sky the color of scrap metal. As the town fell away behind them, Bristlehaven rose before them like a line drawn in ink. Gates, well-trimmed hedges, a stone arch that said you were entering a different grammar of power. Caleb felt a low, clear dread, not of violence, but of a place that had 100 ways to declare someone irrelevant on paper. He put his hand on the steering wheel as if that touch would steady his plan. He had a list of demands and an hour of daylight. They had a stamp that wore his ex-wife's name. At the gates, a security booth sat like a small island of glass. A guard stepped out as their truck slowed. He wore a metal badge with a coiled emblem Caleb didn't yet recognize. Marcus swallowed. You ready for this? Caleb looked at him, then at the crest, then back down the road where the path forked into the manicured estate. I'm ready, he said. The guard raised a hand and spoke into his radio. State your business, he said. Caleb's voice, when he answered, came steady. I need to see the manager who authorized an override on my account. Now. The glass hallway felt like a throat you walked through at your own peril, slick, reflective, designed to show you nothing you needed to see. Caleb felt the walls close in with every step. Cameras in the cornices tracked them. A guard's radio clicked in a rhythm he could feel in his ribs. The receptionist's smile was a mask, but when she opened her mouth her voice came thin, as if she'd swallowed a bee. Manager Stannon's office smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and lemon polish. He closed the door, and for a second Caleb thought he would stand there and weigh the choice of leaving. Stanton's hand hovered over the blotter. Then he pushed himself down into the chair with the weariness of a man under too many orders. You made quite an entrance, Stanton said. It wasn't accusation, just fact. Caleb placed the photocopy of the override on the desk and stared at the forged signature until the ink seemed to move. "Who authorized this?" he asked. Stanton's eyes flicked to the camera over the door and back. He didn't reach for the paper. "I can't tell you everything," he said finally. "But you deserve to know the purpose." Marcus, who had stayed a step behind, leaned forward. "We heard your people pushed it through. That stamp matched something from Bristlehaven. But why? What did they need the money for?" Stanton inhaled like he was clearing a throat that had been full of other people's words. He took the sheet, smoothed it, and then, slowly, pushed a different document across to Caleb. It was stamped, official, and cold. Harrington Family Foundation, internal allocation. Caleb read the header once, twice. Under it, a line item stood like an ugly sentence. Allocation, Risk Mitigation Fund, discretionary, $42,000. The numbers blurred. The torch on the bench in the workshop sounded in his memory, steady, honest. This was neither charity nor education. This was a private account, a slush fund with a bureaucratic name, used to manage liabilities. Caleb felt something in him snap, like a wire. The anger that had been coiled under exhaustion leapt forward and slammed into his chest. His hand went to the edge of the desk until his knuckles whitened. "Risk mitigation?" Marcus repeated, voice flat. "You mean they used his money to pay to erase him?" Stanton's fingers tapped the desk. "They euphemize. Mitigation means removal, relocation, quiet settlements, whatever prevents reputational exposure. This is not uncommon among our larger partners. They create a discretionary fund to solve problems away." Caleb's mouth went dry. He saw his ex-wife's signature again, Denise's slanted D, and something colder than fury slid into place, a grief that tasted like betrayal. Somebody had dug into archived consent forms, found a name they could reuse, and turned it into a legal key. Why would they use Denise's signature? Caleb asked. The question came out small, like a child asking why a lighthouse falls. Stanton's jaw tightened. Old records. Legacy files. They maintain relationships with regional managers and can request archived authorizations for continuity. It's a loophole exploited by partners with influence. He hesitated, then added, "They asked for discretion. We complied because not complying has consequences." Marcus's face hardened. Consequences? For whom? For the branch. For me. Stanton's voice was brittle. He looked at Caleb like a man watching a slow leak in his life. "If I refuse a partner's procedural request, my department's funding is at risk. My position is at risk. The institution is cooperative because of scale." The receptionist in the corridor pressed a hand to her mouth. In the glass, a security camera did a small swivel, almost deliberate, toward the office door. Stanton's eyes flicked to it, and for a beat Caleb saw a man calculating whether to help or hide. He saw fear. "Why let us in?" Marcus asked. "Why not stonewall?" Stanton's fingers found the phone. "Because they want this contained. They want to manage the narrative. Bringing you in here, on our turf, allows them to control who sees what, when. It looks cooperative. It looks reasonable. It also lets them set the frame." Before Caleb could respond, the receptionist's voice came through the half-closed door, high and thin. "Manager Stanton?" She stopped. Her hand moved on the intercom like a twitch. A shadow slid past the frosted glass. The camera over the corridor made a tiny mechanical whine. Stanton's face changed. He looked suddenly very small. "They're here," he said. The knock came then, 3 slow, precise raps. It landed like a gavel. When the door opened, a woman's silhouette filled the frame for a second. The receptionist had peeked around the corner as if to watch a trial. Stanton's hand hovered over a button under his desk. The woman on the threshold did not speak. Instead, she held a tablet up like evidence, a summons. Stanton read it and paled. "You're not going to like this," he said to Caleb. Caleb reached for the paper. The text was clinical, bureaucratic, perfect in its cruelty. It addressed him by full name, listed his birth year, his address, and even his employment. Caleb Rourke, born in 1972, proprietor, Rourke Ironworks. It demanded his presence in conference room A in 30 minutes for a partner-led clarification meeting initiated by Harrington Foundation liaison. Marcus glanced at Caleb. "They've run his background," he said, flat. "They know everything." Caleb's heart thudded. Being summoned was no longer a request. It was a spectacle arranged long before he arrived. The room felt cold with planning. Stanton's hand trembled as he closed the file and locked eyes with Caleb. If you go in there, you go in where they control the cameras, the words, the timing. But if you don't, he trailed off. Caleb swallowed. The torches hiss from the workshop felt distant. Again, a steadiness beyond politicking. He set his jaw. I go, he said. Outside, through the glass, the estate's neat hedges rustled as if agreeing. They had brought him into a house that hid its own shadows. He rose. The summons in his hand was not just a request. It was a recorded moment. He walked toward the door. The walk to conference room A felt nothing like an invitation. It felt like a transfer. The liaison didn't lead them so much as contain them, walking just ahead with a purposeful stiffness, stopping only when the cameras finished turning to follow them. Every few steps, she pressed her badge to a panel without looking back, as if ensuring the hall stayed sealed behind them. Halfway down the corridor, a guard stepped out of an alcove and murmured something into his radio. The liaison glanced over her shoulder. You triggered a partner review the moment you entered the building, Mr. Rourke, she said. They prefer to address such situations internally. There it was, the real reason they had let him in at all. Not courtesy. Control. Marcus muttered. This place eats people. The liaison heard him. She didn't deny it. At the door, she stopped. Only Mr. Rourke may enter, she said. Marcus stepped forward. He doesn't go in there alone. She raised an eyebrow, patronizing, amused. This isn't a negotiation. Caleb met Marcus's eyes. This time, the look wasn't a request for backup. It was gratitude and warning. Marcus's jaw flexed. You yell if anything smells wrong. Caleb nodded. The liaison opened the door. The clicks sounded final. The room was designed for psychological advantage. Too bright. Too quiet. Table too long. Chairs too far apart. A single camera rotated slightly as Caleb entered, a small, obscene movement, like something licking its lips. 3 people waited. The liaison, who now stepped around him like a shepherd corralling stray livestock. A young man with a tablet whose eyes never left the screen. And Eli Harrington, seated at the head of the table, legs crossed, posture flawless, like someone posing for a magazine spread titled Inheritance. Eli smiled thinly. Caleb, we've all had quite a morning. Caleb sat. The chair was intentionally stiff, built to keep a man from leaning back or relaxing. Let's begin, the liaison said, sliding a folder forward. Our purpose is to resolve your disruptions and clarify expectations. Caleb ignored the folder. You forged a dead woman's signature. The liaison's expression didn't move. A legacy authorization was accessed through appropriate channels. Nothing illegal occurred. Eli's voice cut in, smoother. The real issue is the instability this created for Marielle. She's under tremendous pressure, and your behavior has complicated things. Caleb stared at him. Eli stared back, polite, patient. Then Caleb said, quietly, You used my daughter's future as a lever. A flick, just a flick, of disgust crossed Eli's face before he schooled it. Not rage. Not fear. Disgust. There it was. The crack. You're making this emotional, Eli said. We're dealing with structure. Stability. Cohesion. Something bigger than sentiment. Caleb felt something shift in him. Not anger this time, but a moment of raw, wounded clarity. He saw Denise's signature again. Saw 12-year-old Marielle in welding goggles, cheeks smudged. Saw how easily these people rewrote blood. His throat tightened. Just once. Then it passed. The liaison opened the folder. Here are the terms that would stabilize the situation. Inside was a settlement. Not financial. Behavioral. Caleb scanned the clauses. He would withdraw from all financial involvement. He would refrain from public statements. He would allow the foundation to manage concerns relating to Marielle's well-being. Then he saw the clause that turned his stomach. Subject agrees to voluntary psychological assessment to determine suitability for continued familial contact. Caleb's skin went cold. You're serious, he said. The liaison didn't blink. We need assurances that any future contact is safe, stable, and in alignment with Marielle's goals. Safe. Caleb repeated. You're painting me unstable so you can take her. Eli sighed. The kind of sigh used on slow students. That clause protects everyone involved. A simple evaluation. Routine. It's a gag order dressed as therapy, Caleb said. The young man typed rapidly. Refusal will be noted as noncompliance. Caleb looked at the liaison. And if I don't sign? She folded her hands. Then the residency offer is withdrawn. The venue contract is canceled. And the incident reports filed today become public. Caleb stiffened. What incident reports? The young man answered without emotion. Any report submitted by a partner institution is automatically entered into the state security file. It follows you indefinitely. A neat, clean weapon. Filed the moment he walked in. Caleb stood. The chair scraped loudly, the only honest sound in the room. The door didn't open when he grabbed the handle. The knob turned halfway, then stuck. A cold shock hit his chest. Locked. Humiliation blooming hot. Panic, sharp and immediate. He felt it rise, the instinct to hit something, break something, run. He closed his eyes. He breathed. When he opened them, he was steady. Unlock it, he said. The liaison clicked a button under the table. The lock released with a soft, electronic sigh. He looked back once. Not at Eli. Not at the liaison. At the file. At the clause that erased him. Then he walked out. Marcus was on his feet the second the door opened. He scanned Caleb's face. What did they do to you? Caleb swallowed. They tried to rewrite me. Marcus blinked. Did it work? Caleb shook his head. No. He looked down the long hallway, lit like an operating room, watched from every angle. They're not done, Marcus said quietly. Caleb's jaw tightened. Neither am I. They walked toward the exit. Behind them, the camera pivoted again, slow, deliberate, like something memorizing a threat. For a full day after the conference room, Caleb felt hollowed out, like someone had scooped his insides and put a fine dust in their place. He tried not to think, until Marcus sat in the office with a thermos of bad coffee and told him to. We do this right, Marcus said. No theatrics. Caleb nodded and, for a moment, let the exhaustion overtake him. He sat down in the welding chair and stared at the torch he'd left cold. The shop noises, compressor thrum, the rattle of a distant truck, Joel's radio, stitched themselves into a rhythm that steadied his pulse. He closed his eyes and for a beat, he let himself fall apart. The memory of Denise's tilted signature, Marielle's small hands, years of stretching dollars, the humiliation of the liaison's clinical language. The collapse wasn't dramatic. It was a slow, physical thing, a breath that turned into a sob in his throat before he swallowed it back down. Enough, he told himself when the shaking eased. Rage is fine fuel, but it's brittle. He needed something harder. Proof, witnesses, and a plan. Hector's turning was not clean. Hector arrived late, cheeks hollow, a man carrying a risk. He'd been trembling on the phone for days, alternating between near panic and steely excuses. They'll fire me, he'd said, voice small. They'll ruin me. They're Harrington donors. I did what I thought was routine. Now, at a diner booth smelling of burnt coffee, Hector pushed a stack of printed emails toward them like contraband. I didn't mean for it to be used like that, he said over and over. His hands shook when he handed Caleb a USB. I took stuff before they tightened the logs. I shouldn't have, but if you don't, he stopped, swallowed. The guilt in his face was raw and human. Marcus watched him. So you risked your job? Hector nodded. I risked it to stop a lie. I want to help my family and not be part of this anymore. There was fear in the way he looked at the Harrington name. There was also relief that someone might actually use the paper he'd handed them. He wanted anonymity, but knew the truth needed exposure. He left before dawn, eyes darting at the parking lot like a man who expected men in suits to follow. Tessa did not believe him at first. She did the charity of skepticism. Her editor, a careful man with litigation nightmares, made the ask that tempered the newsroom's appetite. You have to understand, he told Tessa. If the Harringtons put a lawyer on this, we'll be bleeding cash in discovery. He wanted a signed release from Caleb, stronger sourcing, more corroboration. Caleb signed that release in Joel's broken bathroom, hands scarred and precise. He gave Tessa every document. Hector's emails, Stanton's memo, the bank photocopy, the allocation line that read Risk Mitigation Fund, discretionary. Tessa followed the paper trail back through directories and timestamps. She pressed the paper into shape with the patience of someone making a case. There'll be pushback, she warned. I can't promise this will land the way we want. They'll threaten suits. We have to be ready to litigate, or it dies in production. Caleb felt the old terror creep in, the kind that makes good men fold. We'll take it, he said. We'll take the fight. She looked at him, then at Marcus. If we go accurate. No melodrama. leave them nothing to spin. The first public step was messy. Tessa's piece ran as an investigative feature, careful and fierce. The Harringtons' PR responded with a fast, glossy statement about partner cooperation and a review. Their lawyers sent a letter. The paper's legal counsel actually read Caleb's documents in a quiet room and called him at night to ask for explanations that left him raw. Why he'd let Hector keep copies, why he hadn't sued sooner, whether he could verify timestamps. The Harrington counterpunch was real. An internal memo leaked to a social feed claiming Caleb had disrupted bank operations and raised concerns for staff safety. The Foundation's board convened. Their counsel quietly threatened Tessa's paper with discovery until the small newsroom felt the pressure of a big machine. But the paper had done its job. It forced the regulator to look. The State Financial Oversight Office requested the bank's internal logs and a compliance review. The bank, caught between a big partner and a public regulator, couldn't paper over everything with a curt letter. Marielle didn't pivot immediately. Her first calls were thin with confusion and shame. "Dad," she said once, "I don't know what to think. They showed me footage they say proves I was upset about you. They said you made a scene and that I had to distance myself." Her voice broke. "They told me they'd pull my residency if I didn't comply." Caleb listened. He didn't scream. He let her say all the cultivated lines they'd fed her. When she was quieter, he told her, "Come to the shop. Look at what we have." She came because she was curious and because the Harringtons' pressure had become claustrophobic. She read Hector's emails in the fluorescent light, watched the bank photocopy, watched a still frame of the envelope being set on the seat. Her body betrayed her skepticism. She flinched at her father's name in print, at Denise's looping D, at the sentence that said money had been routed into the Foundation's internal fund for mitigation. She looked away, angry and ashamed. She began. "I don't know what to do." "You don't have to decide now," he said. "You just have to look." That uncertainty was honest. She was used to being told what to think. Now she had to hold an opinion that wasn't handed to her. The change wasn't cinematic. It was a small, human wobble. Later she would tell friends she felt betrayed. Later she would apologize. That night she slept at the shop on the bench, forehead to his shoulder, the kind of uneasy truce that's the first fragile step back. Harrington tried one last shove. They leaked a more detailed incident report to a business blog, a sanitized version with redacted timestamps and quotes from staff. The report suggested the bank had acted appropriately given the risk. Their lawyers contacted the regulator with denials and counterclaims. At a private board meeting, they debated whether to issue a full restitution or bury the matter. But the regulator had the files. Once a public office opens an audit, the machinery of disclosure inched forward. It's slow and specialized, but it's a process that doesn't bow easily to PR. The Foundation's legal siege slowed progress and cost them allies, and a handful of donors called to express concern. Stanton and Hector had to answer questions from auditors. The Harrington liaison was placed on leave. The Foundation promised an independent review. None of these moves undid the harm, and none fully reconciled the lives touched, but they meant the Harringtons' playbook no longer operated in secret. Caleb's collapse and reclamation. There was a moment, after the story, when the phone call stopped and the silence was full of possibility and dread. Caleb sat on the bench, metal shavings catching the light like a small constellation. He felt fear, real, physical, the kind that knocks you breathless, because the battle had shifted from moral to legal and the weapons were different. He was not sure what the law would gift him. He pictured lawyers in countersuits and the way public hearings can humiliate people. Then Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing," Marcus said, "even if it gets ugly." Caleb let himself fall apart, for 1 minute, at that hand. The collapse was private, a wet breath in the dark of the shop, a shaking body that then steadied because the men around him were steady too. The aftermath was not a tidy victory. The Foundation agreed to pause some partner transactions. Regulators opened a formal audit. Auditors demanded account ledgers. The bank suspended partner override privileges pending review. The liaison's resignation was announced quietly. The Foundation's PR released a statement promising reforms and an independent advisory review. But the board met in private and plotted contingencies. Lawyers prepared counterclaims. The Harringtons didn't fold, they regrouped. The public had attention for a week, then new news cycles began. The work of undoing institutional power is slow and costly. Caleb did get something back, a public acknowledgement that his claim had merit enough to warrant investigation, and a temporary block on further similar partner transfers. He did not get back all the money in a weekend. He did not feel fully vindicated. But the story that had been written about him in Harrington terms had been punctured. And a small, honest scene. One evening, a week after the story ran, Caleb and Marielle stood over a flat steel panel in the workshop. No words, at first. Only the orange bead of the torch as it touched metal. The seam they laid wasn't flawless. It had small ridges, a place where the heat had pushed harder, a tiny blob where the metal had resisted. They worked in silence, hands steadying each other. When the arc cooled, they did not explain it. The metal went from red to gray, and the seam held. Outside, Bristlehaven continued to polish its hedges. Inside, the shop lights hummed. The strip of welding glow cooled, and the two of them stood in the quiet, not healed, but present. They had not won everything. They'd won enough to keep speaking. Enough, for now, to keep showing up. The work ahead would be long and messy. The metal didn't forgive mistakes. It only taught the patient how to hold.